All right, we ready to roll? So what's going on Sunday? Does anybody care here?
Any New England fans?
Who's for New England?
You're not going to like this part of the
Raise your hand.
presentation.
Who's for Seattle? All right, give the woman a hat.
Okay.
I've got 8 Seahawk hats. The last 8 they had in Seattle. I live in Seattle, so last year was a big year because we got a complex being in Seattle, being a small town in the middle of the Northwest. The East Coast establishment doesn't really give a lot of respect to us on the sports side. If you remember last year, there was a play in the NFC Championship game. Who remembers this play? Anybody? What happened? This was the last play of the game. Winner of the game goes to the Super Bowl. These two guys, Richard Sherman and Michael Crabtree, hate each other. Hated each other, hated each other, hated each other. They had been at some football players' party the previous summer. They were separated because they got in a fight because they were talking trash to each other. And the very last play of the game, Richard Sherman goes up and blocks the ball. Afterwards, this is what happened.
Richard, the atmosphere was electric. What's it like
this morning, Wilson's teammate Richard Sherman is getting all the attention with an epic rant after saving the game for Seattle. Listen.
Well, I'm the best corner in the game. When you try with a sorry receiver like Crabtree, that's the result you're going to get. Don't you ever talk about me.
Who was talking about you?
Crabtree, don't you open your mouth about the best. Or I'm going to shut it for you real quick. L.O.B.
All right, and Joe, back over to you.
I think he needs some anger management courses, Andy.
He what? Richard, people are saying Richard, the atmosphere was electric.
Hey, pause on it. So what happened was social media went absolutely nuts after this. And can we hit pause on this? And people were going, this guy's a thug. This guy's crazy. I don't want this guy on TV in front of my 8-year-old daughter and my 10-year-old son. But if you actually did the research on who Richard Sherman is as a human, born in Compton, raised in the projects, perfect 4.0 grade point, went to Stanford, majored in communications. I believe this man was waiting for that moment. He probably practiced with a hairbrush for him to be on that spot. Why? Because he is a brand, right? He became famous because of this. And you fast forward a year later and all sorts of stuff's happened. This is a spot that Beats did. The game was on Sunday. Beats came out on Tuesday with a spot. And we actually were looking at the social, we didn't do any of this work. Looking at the social media analytics and the conversations that happened in social media, which I'll show you a chart right after this, the questions that these reporters are asking were actually in this spot that was put in digital and also in broadcast within 3 days. So the speed of being agile, being fast, of listening to social was embedded in the spot. And so analytics driving creative, Jason and I will talk a lot about that today. But check out this spot that Beats did.
What's it like playing in front of these fans?
It's incredible, man. I think we have the most outstanding fans in the world.
How important is home field advantage for you?
Well, we're going to treat it the same as we have all season. We're just going to continue to take one game at a time.
You really the best corner in the league?
I really do. I really do.
Why did you say your trash talk is a distraction to your teammates?
It doesn't distract anybody. It motivates.
What's your responsibility to the kids on the streets in Compton?
Well, you try to set an example. You try to be an example.
How do you cut down to say your secondary plays dirty?
Well, I take exception to that.
Do you have a problem with aggression?
Not off the field.
Thinks he's so fucking untouchable.
Did you fight a lot as a kid?
Not everybody in Compton's gang, man.
Richard, have you gone downhill since college?
No.
You're an athlete. Do you feel you're untouchable?
I'm not afraid of anything.
What do you think about your reputation as a thug?
I don't have that reputation.
Richard, do you think you are above the law?
So he goes on and puts the headphones on and pieces out, right? And the reporters disappear. But that word thug was a catalyst to a racial conversation in social media that absolutely exploded. And we were looking at the data just because we're data geeks. And if you look there on the 19th, rant spiked up, right? Because that's when people saw him, after that game on TV. He's this crazy guy ranting. We don't know who he is. And then, 3 days later, this being called a thug had surfaced up in videos, and this race conversation happened. And what happened was actually the sentiment started to even out because people at first were like, this guy's crazy, and they started understanding his story, and it got very, very interesting over time. I actually then, on LinkedIn, I write articles as part of their social influencer program. So I wrote 10 reasons why Richard Sherman should run my agency, and had 40,000 views within 2 days on that. And I actually tweeted to Richard to come in and run the agency for a day, and he said he was too busy. So that was pretty hilarious. And then you fast forward to today, and of course I live in Seattle, so I care a lot about these Hawks. This is the most boring man on earth. This is our quarterback, Russell Wilson. He got a Bose endorsement contract, and I swear it's because Richard Sherman did what he did with Beats. And actually, the brand personalities of these two guys, you couldn't be more aligned, right? He's boring, he's predictable, he's corporate. Bose is boring, predictable, corporate. And then you look at Beats, and that goes on. And I don't know if anybody's seen this phenomenon this year with Marshawn Lynch. He's been doing these interviews for how long, Jason? A year?
Yeah.
Where he either doesn't show up to the interviews, or when he shows up, he's giving one-word answers. He doesn't like the press. He's got fined over $100,000 for not answering any of the questions. He just answers the same word. But then you look at, he actually did a spot for Skittles where he actually does answer the questions, and they're all tied to Skittles. And he probably made more than $100,000 of the fines back on him, him being a personal brand. So that, I'm giving these examples of just how much things have changed in kind of the realm of advertising and digital and social, and that broadcast brute force, is certainly mellowing out, and digital first is certainly happening every day.
So this was another one, and we talk about fast and flexible, the theme of the event. And you look at how do you move quickly, how do you do it right? This is a great example of good intentions, but the Seahawks put out "We Shall Overking" Martin Luther King Day after a big comeback the Seahawks had. Turns out comparing football to "We Shall Overcome" and Martin Luther King is not a great idea, and they got absolutely hammered. Formal apology, you go out there and it turned ugly. So trying to take advantage, trying to move fast, but how do you do it smart? And if we look at another one, those of you that may have heard of Deflategate, which this is a great example of, for those that have not seen the news or heard about it, underinflated balls was New England cheating. I believe they probably are cheaters, and like Guy Kawasaki earlier said the cheaters versus the thugs. He used the thug word ironically. But this was a case of how does a brand get in and take advantage of this. So this was turned out very quickly. The day after this was all taking off, there were a number around Deflategate, but doing something that ties to the brand. So first of all, thank you, Michael, Peter, and Michael for having us in. What you guys have on your tables today is just a snippet of the book coming out. As Guy said earlier, if you publish your own book, you can do it a lot faster. I had no idea how right he was on that statement. So our full book is coming out in April, but what we wanted to do is we put a couple chapters in here, and when we were asked to come share some of our opinions, what we've seen, what we're experiencing with different clients, around the book, we decided to pick out a couple of these principles. So the book's made up of 10 principles for doing digital right, digital marketing, all of that. And when we look at that, what we want to do is we commissioned Forrester to do a study. We interviewed over 50 CMOs from around the world. We pulled a good chunk of our 1,200 people within Possible Agency together to share opinions, ideas, and so forth. And we came up with these 10 principles you see on the screen. We're going to focus in on a couple of them. So Shane, go to the next slide. We're going to focus in on these. And we're going to talk about and share some examples in what we're seeing. And we felt these were the ones that were most relevant. So first one being business goals are everything. Second one, data inspiring creativity. Finding unicorns, which is about finding the people. There's been some great quotes today about it. The people is what matters, and I think that's no matter what business we're in. Measuring what matters, and then what it's worth. And what it's worth is an interesting one to quantify the value of different behaviors we're going. Again, a few of those chapters are in the booklets on the table, but those were the ones we thought would be most relevant for today.
So when you look at business goals, one of the things we talk a lot about is just the fundamentals. I mean, how many people here have an MBA? Over half the group. Basics of an MBA, right, are around a business case, around business goals, translating those to some sort of monetization or monetary exercise, and then execution on that. And in 20 years of doing digital, I still see RFIs, RFPs, project briefs that have, at best, vanity metrics. Volume of likes, volume of views, and that's success. but how does that translate to the goal? How does that translate to the business? I was at a Consumer Electronics Show in 2-3 weeks ago, and I sat down at a dinner with a CEO of a large beverage spirits brand, and what was amazing is the CMO wasn't there. I sat with 4 of us at this dinner for 3 hours. The CEO, the head of HR, and the head of the Americas. And I thought it was, at one point I was like, is this a job interview? But he wanted to talk to me about, should he hire a chief digital officer, and how would that person relate to the CMO? And as a digital-centric person, I've always been trying to get in the room with the CMO, and here I am with the CEO and no CMO there. And he said to me, he said, we had a party, actually an event, a corporate event, where they brought in 2,000 social influencers, flew them to some island, brought in a EDM DJ for $1 million, and he doesn't know, he was very frustrated. He said, I'm firing the current CMO because of this. And I said, why? He said, because I don't know if it worked or not. And I go, what was success for you? And he goes, I have no idea. And I said, well, that's crazy. And he goes, well, I've got a 60-page report of all the analytics. I'll send that to you tomorrow. So we went, and the next day he sent me the report, and it was, the first data point on there is they had, was it 5 billion unique impressions of this event. Well, how many people are on this earth?
I think it was 7 billion unique impressions.
7 billion unique,
Yeah.
no, 5 billion, I think, yeah.
5 billion.
So if you actually strip out the people that don't drink and are underage, there's no possible way that this was true. The common sense did not pass the muster. When I asked him, what is success for you? He said, selling volume. That's what I care about. And I said, well, that should be the success metric for any event. Maybe a $15 million dollar party makes sense, maybe it doesn't. But translating that to success, I think we're kind of missing the forest for the trees. So this is a nice picture with me without a chin. But something I get teased about all the time is variance. And what I mean by variance is variance to the goal, variance to the success metric. I ask that every single meeting I'm in, whether I'm talking to our operations people, whether I'm talking to an analyst, whether I'm talking to a creative. And what I mean by variance is, if there's variance to a goal, and that's a column on any of our analytics report for any type of data, that means there was a goal. If there's no variance, then you probably didn't have a goal. If you didn't have a goal, then everybody has a subjective interpretation of the data. And so that fundamental basic principle of lay down a success metric, everybody agree on what the hypothesis is, and then have variance against that is actually a very big indicator of just the basics of what you need to do for success.
So with each of these, we want to look at what does it mean for you guys, and then how do you take action on it? So first principle being business goals are everything. Define them, put a target in place, whatever it may be. So a couple of ways to take action on this is we're encouraging include goals in all your briefs, all your RFPs. Put what the targets are in there, what the expectations are, and then hold yourselves, your agencies, your partners accountable to exactly that. Make sure you're doing it up front and setting goals, and then evaluate the success. Not of, hey, it was really cool, or we got a bunch of press coverage, but how did we really do against those predefined goals? So our second one as we get into this is looking at data-inspiring creativity. And this is one that's come up a couple times. Shane, I'll grab that clicker from you. This has come up a couple times today. Where how do we think about data, and how do we make sure data is not seen as a limiter to creative ideas? How can we have data drive more ideas and better ideas and allow you to do things maybe you couldn't before? So the main theme of this principle is the idea of used correctly, data is creative's best friend, or a creative idea's best friend. And so as we look at that, we've got a couple of examples. And this was something that the benefit of going at the end of the day is we get to cherry pick from all the other presentations. So that's what we did here. I think Ben had a great presentation, but one of the things he mentioned is data obliterates politics. Right? So if we have those goals, if we have those targets, if we know the value, that's gonna help us there. And having that data in and part of it up front is key. The second one is we have no shortage of data, but not enough insights. No shortage of data, but not enough insights. We are swamped with data. I gave everyone everywhere credit for this, because every single person we talk to all the time is, I've got tons of data. I've got too much data. It's not about big data. It's about the small actionable pieces of data. So it's a matter of how do we get that into creative ideas to inspire, not to limit. This is a really interesting one. Shane and I met a woman named Emily 2 years ago now?
Yep.
2 years ago at a WPP event, and heard her story, and I'll play a short video here. Heard her story, and we were so inspired of what it means, and such a great example. We shot a video of this and interviewed her and did some other things, and she's featured in the book. So I'll show a short video here of what data meant to her.
Brilliant ideas arise from the need to solve problems. But problems aren't always obvious. Often, the creative inspiration we seek is found in data. And that's where Emily Brooke comes in. As an avid urban cyclist, she knew the perils of the London bike commute and was passionate about making it safer.
So I gave myself the challenge of tackling the biggest challenge to urban cyclists, whatever that might be, and spent 6 months working with the driving psychologist, working with the bus company, working with a ton of other cyclists to identify what the biggest problem was, and it's personal safety. And there's one statistic that stuck out, which is 79% of bikes hit are going straight ahead and somebody else turns into them.
This important stat changed her whole perspective.
And it's then a case of cycling around town and realizing that truck can't see me. If I was there, he could see me. Oh, I'll project myself there. And that was the idea.
The result? Blaze, a sophisticated product that shows motorists what they need to see. The cyclist.
So the concept did come from data. It came from at least 2, possibly 3 months of deep diving into statistics and analysing what accidents happen and in which scenarios, under what conditions, and that one statistic was literally what formed the idea.
It takes drive and vision to solve big problems. And the Blaze laser light is a shining example of how data inspires creativity.
So normally Emily doesn't do video interviews with her in a sundress and a bathing suit, but we caught her in an event, so she did that. Shane, do you want to talk about this one?
Yeah, this is an interesting story for Skype, where being prepared for the moment, being prepared to adapt is key. So we've been working with Skype in doing all of their social daily content, and what we've found out towards the end of last year is let's put everybody in the room together, the media buyer, the creative, the analyst, the producer, the client, and let's be prepared. So at noon, there's a standing meeting with the client to present ideas. At 8 o'clock in the morning, before noon, we have the analyst come with ideas of what's happening and trending in popular culture. And so this is a case where we are looking at the attributes of the audience segment Skype cares about, and we found this guy on Kickstarter. You hit the next one, Jason. This guy, Eric Sanchez. I don't even know where this came from, but he decided he wanted to raise money on Kickstarter to get Kenny Loggins to play in his living room. And overnight, $30,000 were raised to try to get Kenny to play in his living room. Kenny Loggins wasn't for sale, still is not for sale. But we were like, oh, that's funny, that's ironic, and it's trending. And so we picked it up. We did some tweets and updates from Skype trying to raise more awareness for this Kickstarter campaign. And then our guys called up the Jimmy Kimmel Show and said, hey, this is kind of funny. Would you like to Skype with this guy in his living room that's doing his Kickstarter? And Jimmy's like, sure. And within 24 hours, we went from an insight in data in the morning to an idea at noon. The client said, yeah, that fits enough, to a call, to a ton of earned media, all in 24 hours. If we weren't prepared to have everybody in the room together and the client ready at noon, we could have been talking about that for 3 months or 3 weeks, and the opportunity would have been lost. And so that preparation, to me, is really, really key.
Yeah, it is. And I think if going to a client, or for any of you, going to your teams and saying something like, we want to do this thing with Kenny Loggins and put some money, it sounds absolutely ridiculous, right? So how do you get some of these things that can take off, and data often becomes your close friend in that? So when we look at this, what does this mean for you in terms of data driving creativity? First of all, it's not the enemy. You want to distill the data into easily understandable insights. I think a couple of the takeaways on this one that are interesting is connect your creative and data teams. Are they sitting together? Are they working together? Not just in key meetings, but are they interacting on a regular basis, as the example Shane
Do they know
pointed
each
out.
other? Do they like each other?
Yeah.
The aha moment I see is when the creative director and the analyst are actually having lunch together and actually breaking each other's character, and the data person saying, hey, we've got to have great creative, because if we don't, I'm just going to be reporting bad news, and vice versa, right? The creative saying, I don't know what's going on. I need this person as my partner to be able to see what's happening and get better.
Yeah, so the idea of positioning data as a way to elevate creative ideas, to push the envelope, to do those things you wouldn't normally be able to do, rather than a limiter. So the third, am I doing this one?
Yep.
Okay. The third one, measure what matters. So if we look at this, and there was a quote on it early on, but only measure what you can act on. Measurement without action is a waste of time. So again, when we talk about all this data, we talk about all these things we can do, how are we focusing in on, yes, tied to business goals, but also what really can we do about it? We don't want to just be looking in the rearview mirror. We want to be learning and improving over time. So a couple of key things that jumped out to the two of us today. Ray's great quote of choosing to adapt is the first step to adapting. Right? And so when you think about that, of setting that goal, setting that target, then measuring in on what matters and what's accountable speaks right to that. And then Chris talking about just measuring more. Get in and understand that. Now, there's a caution in there, right? We don't just want to measure. We want to measure based on those goals and what's actionable. But I think a couple of key themes that we saw today.
I mean, Jason and I wrote a book 9 years ago called Actionable Web Analytics, and that was actually looking at clicks in the web. And I never forget the day we decided to write that book. We were in a sales meeting with Omniture, and they were the industry standard at that